Hey everyone, welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me David Green from Limelight Comics and the author and creator of The Captivating Light. So, welcome to the show.
Yo, yo, yo. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, now I am excited because we've been wanting to do this, I think, since May, and it's finally happening. And there's a lot to talk about. Everybody's busy. I get that. You get that. But I think the perfect place to start is what exactly is Limelight Comics? Because a lot of people are hearing this name for the first time.
Limelight Comics is a brand that started back in 2017 with me and my friend Wayman. We decided to include our kids as well, but it's a brand that we wanted to stick out for, to be in that limelight for people to recognize and to carry on for generations to come. So, I'm pretty sure, like everybody else, they want to build a brand for their kids and the kids to be like the next Marvel or DC. So that's where we got the inspiration from because we're huge Marvel and DC fans, and that's the type of brands that we wanted to build, but take it a step further. So we looked at what they were doing, and we tried to take it a step further.
Yeah, and to talk a little bit about that, because the indies are not what they used to be, you
Right.
know, in the comic world, and clearly it has expanded dramatically, and we're starting to see a lot of brands pop up. And your brand started in 2017, and then your first title, and I think it's your only title currently out there, is The Captivating Light. And so, how did this come about and start the idea of this flowing? Because it's dealing with a lot of stuff.
Actually, like I said, it started with the idea of when Marvel was doing all of these big crazy shows and stuff. When me and my friend Wayman, we sit down and break the shows down. We used to watch so many YouTube channels, trying to figure out the Easter eggs, and it was just that love for the characters. And we were like, well, we, we started breaking down the show so much to the point to where we were like, hold up, that didn't make sense, or hold up, that why didn't the character do this? So we decided to, from there, we said, know what? We started with one character, and then we said, like every day, it was just like characters in just short backstories until we ended up with like, I think over like close to 1182. And then we started world building, and then 3 years later, actually in 2019 is when we actually started Limelight Comics at the end of 2019. That's when we came up with the name. We really started moving forward with the logos and everything. And I did two Kickstarters last summer. And that helped jumpstart the Captivating Light. And so I took this time, months and months, to kind of build the character up. And then COVID hit, so I had extra time to finish building out the character. I actually got sick with COVID, so I couldn't go anywhere. So that was even, I'm not gonna say it was even better, but I stayed here all day. Um, and so I just had that opportunity to really uh, like world build and really get into the mind of these characters. So
Yeah, and to even talk about that, I'm going to jump into the story in a second here. But world building, last night I had two people on, and you can watch that on Facebook Live, everybody, if you're interested, because it was very much writing. And we
right.
were talking about this concept of creating a Bible of your world and your characters. And it sounds like that was the approach you took in creating this world and setting up the rules and the characters and understanding who your characters were and are and taking that time. So, what was that entire experience like? Because that's how it sounds like you started to write it first using that method versus just throwing what sticks at the wall.
A lot of changes. That's what sums it up. But like I said, we started with that character, and then he would always, I feed off his energy, he feeds off my energy, and he said, well, what about this? And I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that. So then it's back to the drawing board, and then he's like, oh, well, what about this? And so then, like I said, on the IndieGoGo video, I started watching my son. Kids say the darndest things. And so I would just give him toys and let him play. And, he starts saying stuff. And I'm like, oh, what did you just say? And I start jotting it down, and I jot down everything. To the point to where it feels like some people think I ignore them. I'm like, no, I'm getting ideas down. I'm listening, but I'm getting ideas down. And since I come from an educational background, I was a teacher for 5 years, 6 years, math and science. It's a little more challenging to come from doing mathematics to actually writing, putting it to paper. I have it up here, but getting it to that paper in a way that makes sense, and the creativity is there, but it's getting it down. Oh, also, I went to the comic book store a lot. And what I did, I bought a lot of different comics, and I was studying, Jonathan Hickman, studying other artists, other writers and artists, to kind of see how exactly about story building as well as world building. And the reason why I mentioned Jonathan Hickman is because at my local comic shop, one of the ladies suggested that he's a great world builder, especially with the whole X-Men series and things like that. So I started buying some of his stuff, and yeah, that's pretty much how that process went. Now I made changes to the comic. It took me almost a year. I made changes to the comic almost up till maybe weeks ago. And I was running a Kickstarter not too long ago, so I was still making changes. And I actually had, I don't know if you know Richard Friend from DC. He's artist, inker, and writer. He sat down with me, and he did a private viewing of my book, and it made so much more sense of the things that he was saying. So then I went back and I really made changes last week, and I got the book printed again. So um, yeah, it's been a lot of help from a lot of different people. Even you had Tyrone Jackson on a few weeks back. He's been a really big help to me too as well.
He's actually a moderator in one of my groups that I run.
Ah,
So he knows what he's doing, and his company Sovereign Comics is something that really is pushing out there, and he knows a lot of people as well. Just to throw it out, if you haven't had a chance to listen to that interview that I did with him, it's a really good one, and it's
yeah,
something that's worth it. And you can find it somewhere down in my page, or just on the live section of my page, or the video section of my page. But having all that help, we're kind of teasing what this book is about. And I kind of want to talk about that a little bit more before people
right.
start losing interest in us, which would defeat the entire purpose of what we're trying to do here. So,
Right.
Captivating Light is fascinating on a multitude of levels. And I think the best way how to describe it is it's sort of a supernatural superhero story of a Miami teenager who's friends create startups and entrepreneurial companies and are in sort of a very entrepreneurial tech high school. But he's still in high school, and then there's sort of a touch of religion heroism in there to some degree, and it kind of unfolds from there. So, where did this all come from, and the basic idea, and throwing it out there? Because this is not the traditional story we get, and even someone on the indies, it's a little bit further back and out in the stratosphere, for lack of a better word here, to put it nicely. And I think it's interesting.
Yeah. So, um, like I said, it always derives from what we aren't seeing on the big screen. And for the longest, all I knew were the big two until I actually got in this game and I seen other people's comics. And what I noticed a lot was, there is a lot of biblical things used in a lot of people's art and in stories. So I said, with me being a Christian, I said, you know what? I wanted to show a hero that's a Christian, um, that's regular, and just your average everyday person. So he actually gets his powers from this pocket Bible and this necklace. And that story actually comes from my dad was in the military and he was stationed over in Tel Aviv, Israel, and he went to Egypt and he sent me back these necklaces which somebody stole when I was in middle school. So he sent me back these gold necklaces that had my name. So I used that experience to actually tell this story. You know, enhanced it a bit, but that whole experience is what the story is about. The entrepreneurship is what I actually do now. The businesses that he's running are my actual businesses in real life. Um, so it was like a twofold thing. I got to advertise as well as tell a story. And like you said, it's not your usual thing. And what I really wanted to do was merge American comics with like an anime type of feel. And what I mean by that is I ran some polls on some Facebook groups and I said, well, what makes anime different from American comics? And it was mostly the fact that you can get connected with these characters in anime as opposed to American comics. Is more like, a lot of action, big battle scenes and things like that. So that's what I tried to merge the two together, and I came up with that story.
And yeah, I think this is fascinating. So I want to start with the Christianity stuff. I tend to be more atheistic, for lack of a better word, for even if that's not a word, or we get the idea, everybody here.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I find that there is clear Christian elements in it. We get this idea that the character Legend, also known as Light later on, is a Christian, and that's where his morals are derived from. And
right,
but at the same time, we also see him as a normal person, and the religion's in play, but the religion is also not in play on what he's
right.
doing. And I think that's a very nice touch because it's not shoving it down our throats, but it's still there. So what is that like? Because I've read comics and I've read books and I've seen movies and TV shows that definitely shove it down your throat to some degree. And even in Marvel and DC, sometimes they do it a little bit without trying to do it. So, what was that like finding that happy balance? Because I think you did a really good job with that.
Um, is it's actually just it's taking actually who I am and just knowing that people aren't perfect. And I think that sometimes the message in Christianity, like you said, and some of these other things, they make it seem like you're perfect, or you have to do this and do that, and that's totally incorrect. And I just wanted to show a character that's a human being, but his faith is over here placed. And like you said, I've read a lot of other Christian comics because this is actually not a Christian comic. He's just a Christian character. But I read a lot of other Christian comics where it becomes overwhelming and it doesn't have that balance. So that's what I kind of focused on, was that balance, to see him as a normal person, a person you can connect with, and not let his faith overpower anything else. But it still is his core value and core person.
And to even talk a little bit about that, he does get a variety of morals from his Christianity and his faith,
Right.
but there is room for other places for him to get his morals from. And we haven't
Right.
exactly seen that yet, per
Right.
se. And I don't want to ruin too much in the book. And the first issue is sort of just getting everybody on the same page. But I like that too, where Christianity isn't the only derivative of morality for him, and he has lessons to learn. He's a high schooler. In high school, I don't know about you, but I wasn't, all my morals weren't all developed then
No,
either,
no.
based on, the religion I had, and I was raised Jewish. So
Right.
similar faiths, you and me.
Right.
So what is that like to leave room for that open? Because I think that also really helps and makes this book seem real. We're seeing this fictional entity sometimes that we get in other places.
Um, I left a lot of room for the character to grow and people to grow with the character. And as you can see, well, as when people read the book, you'll see that, like you said, the Christianity's there, but he also has this side where when you're reading it, he's pulling things from experiences in life, like when he sees the girl. I don't want to name her name, but when he sees the new student in class, he automatically gets
The
like goes into
hot
this
new
daze.
student. The hot new
Yeah.
student.
Yes, he goes into this daze and starts singing this song, and so you see the real world aspect of him, and so you get to see that real world aspect of him, and in the coming books you'll see more of that too. It's just that balance, you know. Um, and it takes a lot of writing and really stepping back and saying, what, you know, and it's almost like getting in the role of him, honestly. Um, Maybe even talking to myself in the mirror. It gets weird, but yeah, it's a lot of planning,
And
because it's not like just your regular superhero. Now I have other superheroes I don't have to do as much. It's easier to do them, but on him it's a little more challenging, you know.
And to stick with the Christianity a little bit before we jump into the entrepreneurial side, which I think is just as interesting in this book, let's talk about his superpowers because they're interesting and they're
Right.
definitely religious, somewhat based. It's also almost like a Paladin Knight based type superpower, and there's a supernatural element. Celestial armor is a good way to put it. He has
Right.
the power to almost bring out dimensional items, and I don't
Right.
know the exact way. I'm sure you're going to describe better than me. And he also has a place to go that's called the Isolato, or
Yeah.
I think I said it right. It's basically an isolation world. Think going into the Avatar state, which we were talking about before. We got
Exactly.
live. Especially Legend of Korra does that really well, which we were also speaking about before we went live. Just so everybody understands that where I'm getting that idea from, but that's kind of what he can also go into. And we haven't seen much of his powers yet in the first
Right.
issue that's out that can be picked up. But what are his powers exactly? And without giving too much away, because he still needs to learn how to use them in many ways.
Right. Right. So I'll give them a few, because I don't want to make any spoilers, because as the series continues and he's learning, that's when some of these other powers come into play. But basically his main powers, his celestial suit is basically similar to Spawn's, how Spawn's is. That's the best way to put it. Without all the bells and whistles of stuff coming out, but with his suit, it looks like everything is flat on him, like a Spider-Man suit. But when he reaches for his weapons in the back, which is the cross in the back, which is a shield, and that cross, when you look on the first page, it switches between a diamond shape and a circle, but it also has a square, which wasn't used in this first book. And they're each used for something different. Attack is the diamond, the circle is for blocking, and the shield is like just for protection all around. I mean, the square shield. So he pulls things from another dimension, like you said, and the hilts that he have, the butt ends of the sword, they do different things. I only showed the actual sword that pops out. The other side actually does something different things completely, which is not going to be shown in this series. I mean, in this
Let's not
book.
ruin it then. Let's not ruin it.
Exactly. So, bullet disintegration. So when he's being shot by regular bullets, the bullets disintegrate and just turn to dust right in front of him. Now, if he's being shot with a supernatural bullet or weapons, it's a different story. Um,
Hint, hint there.
that's pretty much the two powers that are focused on for like maybe the next book or two. Um, I Yeah, that's all I want to touch on, because I don't want to give away the other powers.
Well, we're going to find out soon enough anyway. So I think that gives everybody an idea of what powers he has. And then I kind of want to switch gears and focus on the other side of this book that I found to be very interesting, at least in the first issue.
Right.
And that's Legend's involvement in entrepreneurial businesses and startups and throwing ideas out there. And we see that with him doing something with wearable training gear and making the
Right.
pitch and really getting into the nitty gritty with that pitch. And then we also see his involvement in another thing. I think it's the Mamba car engine.
Yeah.
Fast and Furious is the
Yeah.
thing I got in there. You made a bunch of references. I'm a big Fast and Furious guy. You know, personally, that's one of those series that I love. And
Right.
so, what was that like to show, I guess, the micro level of the entrepreneurial side and show a macro and idea side and also elevate it? Because it's kind of, I don't want to say it's a dirty word in America, but to some degree, the E word is dirty right now in this country.
So, like I said, we live in a different time where, everybody is doing entrepreneurship, from little kids all the way through older adults. And so I said, you know what? I wanted to give them something different than just going to high school, making it like every other high school story. And I said, let's give them an entrepreneurial mindset and just take it a little further. So he has a couple friends. Bruno, who's from Brazil, loves music, loves different things. He loves technology. His focus, him and Bruno create this wearable tech company for sports players called Icon Sports. And so they focus on that. Now, he also has another friend who's Asian American, and his name is Tommy, Tommy Fan. And as you catch in the book, he's always like, Tommy, what's up? Yo, Tommy. And they are working on what's called Mamba technology. And that Mamba technology is an engine right now that runs off of air. So that's what they're working on. They go and build this vehicle. They take a 1990 Nissan 300. They have it modified to put the engine in the back. And to them, that's their Ferrari or Lamborghini. And you see them testing it out in the first issue.
And so what is it like to throw these ideas out there and have high schoolers doing it? Because as I stated, we do see a lot of entrepreneurs right now from all over. There's a lot of self help for that. Good or bad is up for debate. But right now, in our country to some degree, and not to get too political, but it seems very much that entrepreneurial spirit and ideas and running a business is being attacked to some degree by everybody who's not doing it. And so, what
Right.
is it like to really put a positive spin on that and show that it's a good thing? Because that's the vibe I got out of this comic, and show that it's
Right.
a worthwhile journey. Because you don't see that, and you don't see that in comics. We
Right.
see everything else to some degree in comics, but we do not see any comic, and I don't ever remember a comic that had anything to do with entrepreneurial entities, for lack of a better word. And you can see that I'm
Right.
kind of struggling to put a pin on it because it's non-existent. It really isn't. So what is that like to throw that idea? Because people are reading this, and on the indie scene, people are probably more open-minded to these ideas.
Right. To be honest, I think it was more so influenced by what I'm doing as an entrepreneur. And when I was teaching high school, I used to always take time to, I had a certain period of the day, which was like the morning on every Tuesday and Thursday, to teach young men how to do certain things they needed in life. I played chess with them. I did all these different things, and I started teaching them entrepreneurship. So I would have them come in class every day, and I would say, think of something you use every day and how to make it better. And so at first there was some resistance, but after a while, they started creating stuff, and I was like, oh, don't tell me too much because then I'm gonna start, I might have to take that idea. And they started creating great ideas, and I said, you know what? They have it in them, they just don't realize it. And they can be further quicker, or they can do things that they really don't understand that they can do, or think of. Um, I actually worked with a lot of lower income inner city students who thought that basketball and music was their way out. And I said, no, you got a brain. You can think of things. There's a different way. So I challenged them in entrepreneurship, and I even introduced it to all my classes through math, because math is one of those subjects where a lot of students are like, oh, do I really have to do it?
Oh, I
And
failed
so
math.
that was the great segue, huh?
I failed math. I barely passed math. I was in like collaborative math, and you put a money sign in front of that, whew, I'm good to go.
Yeah, see, it changes things. Like when you put it to context, you're like, well, when am I going to use this? All right, well, let's put it in the context of this. Oh, now I know how to do it. Okay, so I started implementing a lot of real world stuff into math, and that's kind of where that idea came from, of implementing him as a teenager as opposed to an adult, as having a business.
And to do
And
that on a
so over
comic
time,
level, and to do that on a
uh-huh,
comic, and to do that on a comic level,
yeah,
coming from a mathematic level is very, very interesting. And I don't think people necessarily get that when they're reading it and without this interview, but that is fascinating, and conveying it in another medium as well is so important, because sometimes ideas, because I don't know if I would have gotten that idea or would have the
right,
same impact as we're talking about it right now as it does in the comic.
right.
And we actually see the product, and we see the work, and we see where it's going, and it's very actually uplifting, and I found that to be very fascinating, and also a little jealous provoking. I'm 27. I'm like, I wish I was that smart in high school, but that's neither here nor there. So so so
um,
so what is it like to even convey that message even further? Because it sounds like when you were teaching high school, you were conveying that message, and you probably changed a lot of young men and possibly a lot of young women's lives, and probably gave them a better out, for lack of a better word here, and probably changed their perspective on what can be done. And now you have that comic that has a very similar message, or an even bigger message, that can reach a worldwide stage in many ways in today's age. So what is that like, to have that
um,
power? Because it's very powerful and influential.
right, and that's what I was actually going for, to influence, to show that whether you're, no matter, when you look at Light, or excuse me, Legend, when you look at him, he has all sorts of facets, and I want people to feel like they can connect with him in any way. Um, and so, to be honest, on Facebook, a lot of my students follow me. Well, excuse me, not a lot, but I have a lot of students that follow me from over the years, and sometimes I forget what school they're from, but they'll reach out and say, "Oh, Mr. Green, I started my own business. I'm doing my shoe company, or or how do I do this, or how do I do that?" And it feels good, because it's like, well, they thought of me, they remembered me enough that I impacted them, that they're asking me for future help, or they're looking to me to say, oh, well, how's he doing it? Or he used to, oh, this is the famous one. Used to tell us about that stuff all the time in front of the class. I used to always share what I was doing with them as inspiration. Um, because it's one thing to talk about it, but it's another thing when you see it, and you're like, okay, well, he's making moves, or she's making moves, and I want to be where they're at, and I want to hang around positive people. So it's just really spreading that message of positivity, um, dreams, goal setting, reaching your dreams, and that's pretty much it. That's what this book is. That's what he's about. Goal setting, and dreaming, and reaching your dreams,
And I have a feeling we're
and
going to see a
light at the
lot
end of the
more.
tunnel.
And I have a feeling we're going to see a lot more of that, and that's going to be way throughout issue 2, 3, 4. I don't know
Yeah.
when you're intending to stop, but there's some good stuff coming, and along with the good stuff, we got to talk about the villains. I'm a villains guy, and the villains are interesting because they're very techy, for lack of a better word, and I like the villains in this.
Right.
And so they are a group, and correct me if I'm wrong, they are sort of a ride sharing group that's using ride sharing as a means to transport people, weapons, drugs, money, and it's kind of good to some degree because I mean it's a piece of technology that allows people to get around, but at the same time they all have weird neck tattoos, and it's not necessarily your traditional villain to some degree, and so and it's and I mean we can't help but think of Uber and Lyft, and they might sue me for saying this, but I'm pretty sure that's what it's based off of.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I actually worked for the corporate office for 2 years, and I would hear all type of stories, and that's where some of this stuff comes from. And I was like, what happened? And I'm not gonna get too much into it, but yeah, I was like, I was baffled, but I had stories to tell, and I still have a lot of stories to take through this story arc, and as well as I do Uber and Lyft sometimes just to get out there and push one of my other startups. But the stuff, people are people. I'll leave it at that. I don't want to offend any. People are people, and I to be honest, I'm pretty sure I've been a drug runner several times. I just didn't know it. When I look back at the situation, and when I was working at Uber, I said, "Oh, that's what was happening. Oh, that's what I was doing. Well, it's a good thing I made it out." Um, so you'll see a lot of my stories in this book, which will help amplify um, my rideshare company, which is called Slide in the book. I called it Slide because I didn't want to use their names. And so what you see is a network of lower level bad guys called road runners, and they wear this certain tattoo on their neck. Think of like a 10 ring organization where they're just one leg of the organization. And so these road runners, they're the front runners. They run all types of drugs and other things in their vehicles, and you notice them by having that pinwheel tattoo, which is this special ink called immortal ink, which is a supernatural ink. um, so not all the drivers are like that, but certain drivers throughout the book, you'll see the little tattoo on their neck. Some of them have them, some of them don't. Some of the passengers have them, and so that's what he's noticing in this first book. And on the first page, the first 2 pages, you see a spread of his actual first villain, which is called Arsenal, and he's known for having a arsenal of weapons. Pretty typical, but his weapon set will be very different.
And so, what is that even like to? And I think you touched on it a little bit, but to even just use real world things because it's not that far fetched. I mean, obviously, the supernatural elements of it are far fetched as it sits, unless we're wrong here completely, and we could be. We could be. It's very possible in today's world. I'm not saying I'm 100% certain that supernatural things don't exist. So if there's a supernatural being out there who's an assassin and you want to come for me, I could be wrong. I'm just gonna throw it out there. Just please spare me and we'll be great. But anyhow, in the event though that I think my probability chance of that is extremely low, the supernatural
Yeah,
stuff might not be completely true there, but
yeah,
definitely, running things and transporting things. We've seen and heard and things happen in Ubers. I mean, everybody's been in an Uber with somebody who isn't quote unquote there, for lack of a better word.
right.
So what is that like to take a real thing and then throw it into a book? Because we talk about your book being real and authentic, and we look at things, DC and Marvel and some a little bit of Image, and they tend to go more sci-fi, fantasy, futuristic, and it's kind of nice to have a real book that is actually viable and can happen. And I think your villains, to some degree, do that. At least their philosophical core and agendas are more realistic.
Right. Um, it's that question in the back of my head, like, what if, I'm riding in the Uber, and it's like, well, what if? this person was actually doing this, and I could do this to it, do this to them, or so that's kind of where it derives from. That mixing, it goes back to that answer I gave earlier about making people feel connected. I do have some stories where it's more fantasy, um, but I love to mix my stories with things that make people feel connected, like this possibly could happen, or that's not too far fetched, like you said. And that's the goal I was trying to actually, that's the goal I try to go for most of my stories. But I do have some stories that are fantasy because I do love that part, that escapism. Um, with this isn't as much escapism. This is more like, oh, I'm still in the real world with a possibility, maybe this might happen. So, um, that's pretty much what it is.
And we haven't seen much of these villains, and we
Mm-mm.
kind of see a little bit of everything in the first issue. We see a little bit of his superpowers. We see a little bit of the crush on the girl and him flirting with the girl and seeing where
Yeah.
that's going. We obviously
The
see
school.
his friends. We see some of the technology he's working on and his startups. And I guess the question is that obviously book two eventually is going to come out. I'm not exactly sure when, and I'm sure you have a better idea than most of us listening do. But what can people expect going into book two, three, and four and onwards, where this series is going without giving too much away?
So over the next few books, which I'm trying to aim for a book two, maybe December. I've already started writing the second book. I have it written out over a 10-story arc. And the 10-story arc actually takes place he's in his junior year, and it takes place over that junior 1 year period only. So I left that room of being able to expand the storylines further. And so in the next books, you'll see him go more into isolato mode, where he's trying to learn how to use these powers. Um, you'll see him kind of struggle between being a superhero now and these startups, because running a business is like alone that requires so much attention, and so he's trying to juggle superhero, startup, and school, and you see that whole struggle and him trying to balance life. um we do see some other people come. I don't want to give out too much, but we do see some other people come, and we see several villains being set up throughout this series. Um, some that are actually very close to him, and they don't know it, neither does he, and some that are just hunting him down always. So, and that's it. I don't.
Well,
Yeah.
I have a guess, but I'm not going to say it live because chances are I have a feeling I'm probably right. So I'm going to leave my opinion alone for the time being. I know it's going to tease a bunch of people who are watching this, but I do now
Yeah.
want to go outside of the book and talk about behind the scenes a little bit because you funded a Kickstarter for this, from my understanding. And so, what was that like, and what was that entire experience like of going with Kickstarter first? Because that's kind of the place for indie comics right now in many ways. And we're seeing a lot more
Oh,
big players come into Kickstarter.
yeah. So I went to Kickstarter. I can't remember if because a friend recommended. Um, there's another guy, a friend I met. I can't remember where I met him. I think it was online, Chris, and he has the Omega Black series, an anime. And so he was coaching me a lot at first, and he was telling me about Kickstarter. So I went on the Kickstarter, like I said, last summer, and he told me something that was very valuable. He said, ask for something like $50 so you reach your goal first. You reach it and you get what you need. So I did that. Oh, he told me to do it page by page, do a Kickstarter page by page, because I didn't have any artwork done. I didn't have. I had a sketch of the character. It was very minimal to show on Kickstarter. So I'm surprised I actually got what I got. I think I made like $300 or $400. So that jump started like the first 5, 6 pages of the book. Once I had those 5 or 6 pages of the book done, then I took it to another Kickstarter, and then I got funded again, which helped out more. It didn't fund the whole book, but it helped out greatly, and I just funded the rest of it out of my pocket. It's challenging. I tried to figure out the best way to do the Kickstarter, because when you're seeing, your Ethan Van Skyvers and all these other people, you like, wow. Like, but in the same instance, these guys have been in the industry, and I knew that was working against me.
Yeah, so just to talk about that and to give insight to people who are listening, and I happen to know a lot about the economics of comics with my own personal project, which it's not about me, so I'm not going to say anything about that at the moment. But people like Todd McFarlane and Ryan Brown, Charles Soule just funded Curse Words, which I backed, and I'm thrilled about that entire omnibus is coming out. Zenscope backs and does a lot of omnibuses that are great, and they just did something with their statues, and those things tend to do well. Ethan Van Shriver, I want to say, I think is his name, had what, $1
Thanks.
million on IndieGoGo plus.
Yeah,
When we
yeah,
talk about those people are not the norm by any stretch of the imagination. So if anybody thinks that getting $2 million for a Spawn action figure is what you're doing, that's not the case.
right,
It's there are people who have done very well, and I've known people have been on my podcast who had a goal of 5,000 and they did 50,000. That is a reachable goal if you
right,
have a good product and you know what you're doing. And they were completely baffled because they were going to be doing hand sketches in every book, and they were like, "Fuck," in which they were like, "Fuck," because they thought they were going to reach 10, and they did 5x on what they were expecting to do. And so that does
right,
happen. That does happen. And the person's thrilled, and fuck, my hand's going to hurt after this. She's a nice person. And
right.
it was really a funny interview for that. But that is something that I think has to be spoken about. Where, how do you feel about that on Kickstarter and even Indiegogo? Because it does seem at this point a little bit artificially inflated, but also good at the same
Right.
time, that we now have a lot of big players coming into this sector, and they're doing astronomical amounts. And that's not really true for indie comic creators. If you have an indie book, and we've seen this a lot, and I've interviewed a lot of indie people where they set the goal $500 or $1,000, which isn't a lot of
Right.
money. It's not, and it doesn't fully fund the book. So what is that like, and how do you feel about that? And I know you're not a Kickstarter expert, and I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, no, no. In a way, even when I do set it that low, it makes me feel a certain way. Like, is this all you're asking for, really? And then it puts me in a mindset of, well, if you're asking for this, what are people gonna think? Is this really something they want to, fund? They want to donate to? Because it doesn't really seem. A friend asked me, why is it so low? And I told them why, and they said, okay. And each time I've been funded, and this time I've raised the most. I raised close to almost $800, which is good for me.
So to
Um,
challenge that notion, because Ryan Cummings was on, Chuck Pinu was on,
right,
Casey Bowker and Roman Romero were on, and
right,
they have very low goals. And when I asked them about that, what they said is that they said, well, for the most part, our books are done, and this is covering a good chunk of the printing costs for our books, and this is meant almost as a pre-order form. And I know you do yours a little bit different at right now, and I'm assuming you're going to do book two also somewhat different, not page by page, but more as a whole entity. I'm taking a leap of faith here. When I ask this question, please correct me if I'm wrong, but that to me almost seems in many ways the way that indie comics are being done now, where we're seeing a lot of low numbers, and then we see somebody getting like $1,500 and they're funded 300% versus being fully funded. And so I'm kind of challenging your viewpoint on that, because I think that what you're saying is actually the opposite. of why things are low versus the norm or the unnormal of all the big creators coming in. So I'm curious at how you respond to that.
Um, that is interesting.
Because you are on the opposite side of a lot of people I've interviewed, and not trying to attack you, but you
No, no, no.
it's clearly very much the opposite, and you've done it the opposite way, which I also think is fascinating. I also think it proves the point that if you can't do it, if you can't get it all done, doing it the way you did it might be the first way to do your first book. And I think you've kind of proven that it's okay to do it that way. I think that's something that
Um,
people need to hear. I really think people need to hear that. Sometimes your first book
yeah,
might be a little messy, for lack of a better word.
yeah. I do agree with that. And one thing about me, I'm not an artist first. I'm a business person first that has creativity. So I'm always thinking business minded as opposed to artistic first. Um, so when I was thinking about that, I said, well, if I can just get a little bit, that'll get me going, and then that little bit would be a stepping stone to that next bit, and that's what ended up happening. And this last Kickstarter, well, not Kickstarter, IndieGoGo, I decided to switch to IndieGoGo just to kind of give it a chance because I like the
Flexible
I actually
goals.
like
Flexible
the
goals.
functionality of IndieGoGo more. But I think Kickstarter has the popularity.
It's got the
Yeah,
traffic. It's got the credibility. It's got
right,
big names are coming into it. Big names are coming into Indiegogo, but more big names are on Kickstarter right now.
right, right. So I went that way, and like you said, how Ryan and them said, well, my book is done, and the minimum I can set it at Indiegogo was 500, which was fine because I said, and it was a flexible goal too. I don't think Kickstarter has that flexible goal. So it was a flexible goal to where even if I didn't raise the 500, I was still going to get whatever. And it was just really to cover the print cost of the book. That's what this Indiegogo was about. But the first two Kickstarters helped jumpstart at least the first 10 pages. The book started off as 22, and then as I kept reading, I was like, the story kept stretching out, and it stretched out to 32 pages somehow. Um, so
Yeah,
then that incurred more costs because I didn't actually know what I was doing. I think I switched artists a couple times, so that ate some money up, and I just started funding it out of my pocket. So
and let's talk about that because I'm working on my project as a writer, and I have a rough shell of it, and I'm looking for an artist. And so I'm beginning to understand how complicated this is, and I buy and sell comics, and I move a lot of merchandise, and I made several decisions in the last few months on how to finance something. So I understand the business side very well, and I understand how painful it is. So I'm the first person that knows this, and but I don't know much about printing. I don't know much about that. So what was that like in that learning curve? Because navigating Kickstarter, it can be difficult. Navigating Indiegogo can be difficult. Setting rewards and perks and giving people who support you the respect back for backing you and believing you. So what was that entire learning process? Because, I speak to a lot of people who are on their third or fourth now, and they're now figuring out how to do this. And you're sort of at your first and second, and you're still, I would imagine there's a learning curve.
yeah, it was a learning curve. Um, the first backers I had the first two Kickstarter backer groups of Kickstarter backers I had, they I, I'm grateful for them because I communicated, and it's been a year since this book has been finally finished, and they understood. But I kept sending updates about what's going on. I sent them the artwork, so I stayed in great communication with those backers, and they understood. They were understanding. Um, And to my understanding, I listen to other podcasts and stuff, and sometimes people who do Kickstarters never ever fulfill their rewards.
Happened to me. Happened to me. Took 2 years.
Uh,
2 years. Person burned a lot of bridges in the community.
right.
Person burned a lot of bridges, and it pissed me off because I burned a few
Right.
bridges myself on behalf of them. Not scared to say it, and I'll tell you that story after. It's a good one. But continue, please.
That's what I did not want to do. Because at times I did feel like I felt overwhelmed because I'm writing the story, and then I'm trying to manage how the artwork looks and communicate, because we were all on different continents. So it was a time difference. Like when I would be asleep, my artist is in Chile. So it's that time difference. And so usually when I'm getting his messages or something, it's middle of the night, and I'll communicate with him. And he did a great job, Ronaldo Lay and his brother Eric Lay, on the colors and on the artwork, and he was very patient with me. So that whole arc from last summer to this summer, I lost contact with the backers for a while during the beginning portions of the COVID. Um, and then maybe about 2 months later, I put out a video. I updated them like every other week with a video, a YouTube video, just showing them what's going on, where we're at. And I started researching printers. And I live in Miami, so Kablam is up the street. Well, yeah, I call it up the street, but they're in Orlando, which is 3.5 hours away. So I said I'm going to use them, and then I was like, oh, I heard they do pretty good work. I like Kablam's work, but I don't think I would use them again. And it's just because I have 50 books sitting over there that were printed incorrectly, and the first 25 I ordered, the quality was great, but I was about to send the book out, and I said, you know what? Let me actually read this. And so I read through it, and page 24 and 23 were on the opposite pages, and I said, oh my goodness. So it took them a week to get. I messaged them, and it took them a week to get back to me, and then it took almost 2 weeks for me to get another set of books, and the same problem occurred, but on pages 12 and 13. And I said, you got to be kidding me. And so I messaged them on June 30th, and they just got back to me today and sent another set of books out. And I'm hoping that those books are correct. But after that, I went to Comics Wellspring, which was recommended by Tyrone. And so I ordered some books from Comics Wellspring. I have those books coming in, and the books from Kablam. So my printing experience has been like 50-50. The quality has been spectacular, but the actual finished product, yeah, no.
And you're also digital, right?
I'm also digital, right?
Which
On
is
my
kind of the
website,
future.
digital, huh?
It's kind of the future in many ways.
Yeah, yeah. And I thought I would bring it in at a very low price point, to where it's not breaking people's pockets just because I'm an indie writer.
I mean, I'll be honest, and this might provide insight to some people, and I don't really talk about this much, but with a lot of indie books, I prefer to read them digitally at a lower price point. I find the
Right,
$2 price point or $1 price point for an indie book digital works great for me. I actually just picked up a bunch of books that I thought were beyond fascinating that I never heard of, and I just went on Comixology and I'm like, oh, this looks good, and I dropped like $15 on 15 books that were $1, and I was only looking for dollar books.
right,
Purposely, because I was like, I could take a $15 risk on 15 books. Anything
right,
beyond $2 on an indie book, it's not going to happen for me
right,
digitally. In print, I get it, because that does cost money, and I understand that time, effort. Even if, I'm going to discount it slightly, even if you didn't have a problem with Kablam and they messed you up, you didn't have to go through all those hassles, still required you to outlay money. And so I get
Right.
why a digital book might be $5 at a con. I get it. Which kind of brings me to my next point. And COVID-19, you had COVID. And so that kind of delayed a lot of stuff, or maybe helped you. I don't know, to some degree. I mean, obviously we didn't want you to have COVID. But
Right.
COVID-19 has wrecked the comic realm indefinitely.
Right.
And the comic realm and the comic world and the convention world will never recover fully for a while at the very least. And I think I'm being generous. There's a vote of confidence from people like me who are fans and who present there. There's going to be a vote of confidence from DC, Marvel, the big guys. There's going to be, a vote of confidence from vendors and sellers. And then I don't know how the indie group, which is where you fall in, is going to feel about conventions. And let's be realistic, the fans are the be-all, the end-all here. So, and I don't know if you've been to a con with your book or you were planning to, but how has COVID affected you as far as the comic world goes?
Oof. It decimated every plan I had to actually get the book out there so far as cons. I've even with me reaching out to comic book stores, some are like, yeah, we're willing to take a look at it, and possibly I wanted to do some in-person events, but of course we can't really do that because people would either be lined up outside because of the whole 6 foot thing, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't have the same feel. I didn't pay for any cons yet for this year, but I wanted to. The book actually got finished later than what I expected it, and I was going to try to hit some cons up from August through December. Maybe there might be some. Actually, I think Florida, I think Miami is holding a con in August, so that will be my first con that I'll be going to. I think it's just like a local little one.
And we're going to see how it does. It's going to be a real experiment. I'm telling you, that's going to be a real experiment because I don't know where we're going to be at with COVID in August. And I don't even mean so much the disease or vaccination, but how people feel.
Right.
Because, from my experience, and this might provide insight to other people, you got to buy a table, and then people are going to be around. What rules are going to be in place? There's a whole bunch of stuff. And so I don't know if you've ever been to a Comic-Con as a fan.
One. Yeah.
And so you know what I'm talking about. I've been to, I think, like 40 at this point. I presented 50 panels, multiple panels at cons. I've been to a variety. I've been to New York Comic-Con, and I've been to a local one in Poughkeepsie, New York, which had maybe 500 people if I'm being generous. And so I've seen it all. So what do you think the con scene is going to look like when cons start opening up and the regulations that are in place, and how do you think people are going to be reacting? Because clearly we're seeing entertainment is just decimated right now. And as I stated, it's kind of very much no man's land.
To be honest, it's like I don't even want to think about it because every time I go out, that whole 6 foot thing just blows my mind. And I don't want to picture a con where people are standing 6 feet apart. I mean, obviously it won't be like that all the time because if you go into Walmart or all these other stores, you're not standing 6 feet apart except for when you go in line. But other than that, you're elbow to elbow with people all throughout the store. So I think it would be like going to Walmart. You would see a lot of precautions in place. The mask thing, I couldn't do a con with the mask. That it gets on my nerves, but I understand. It's hard for me to breathe in that mask for a long time.
It's hard for everybody.
Yeah. So I see a con to where it's not going to be that enjoyable like it used to, with all these restrictions, distancing, and it's going to feel very weird.
And to piggyback off of that, because I run a small business on the side as a side hustle, and I don't want to go into that either. This is about you. And the other thing, but you're a businessman, you run a few startups and you're engaged in startups. And so what do you see as the business side? Because everybody else who I spoke to runs a comic stuff, but they have a day job. And you seem to be involved in a lot of startups, and I'm just very curious from that perspective because I don't know where we're heading economically. And again, I don't want to get too political, but it definitely seems that COVID-19 has been a suppression. I think is the best way how to describe it because you shut down the economy for 3, 4, 5 months. It's not a depression. It's not a recession. It's not a surplus. It's a suppression of business. It is
Right.
probably the best way how to put it. And so, what happens from your perspective, and in particular in the comic realm, when things start opening up, but everybody's been suppressed and people are sort of in an economic duress situation, which is what we're seeing. And I know this because I've made several decisions in my business that I'm running on the side of a way to finance it. And I kind of had to sell some stuff that I didn't want to necessarily sell at a loss to cover purchase orders. So I'm curious from that perspective because you probably have knowledge and more knowledge than me on that in that view.
So from a business perspective, a lot of the people, because the cons are mega money for the people who are running it,
Big big
and
big
it
big
trickles down to certain
big
people.
big money for vendors too to some degree. I mean, it's not even so much. I mean, to go further, and I don't mean to cut you off. It's big money for the cons, big money for
Right,
celebrities, big money for comic artists. I don't get
right,
paid as a panelist, which is fucked up. It's fucked up.
right.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm gonna say it bluntly, and then you will wind up having to pay for a table at your con. And but you can make good money too to some degree, as
right.
well as vendors make money. So that's kind of the business side that I want to focus on. But what do you think that's going to happen with all those people,
Ooh, it's greatly going to impact them, but
and then you as
I
well,
think, huh?
and then you also, how are you feeling
Yeah.
about that as a business?
Um, for me, I
Tell everything.
pivoted,
Just tell
but
everything.
yeah.
Just tell everything. No holds bar.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, for me, I pivoted. Like I said, I do like cons, and I was so excited to get ready to go to a con, and I have faith that as the economy opens back up, with all this stuff, cons will return to a somewhat normal, so far as people being able to come in, and enjoy themselves, but with a little more restrictions. Um, I think so far from a business perspective, I think the only time something like you said somebody wouldn't benefit at a con would be if I paid $500 for a table and I really don't sell anything. That's like the only downside I see from a con. But also what comes with that is that exposure. And I think that's the biggest thing. Even outside of money, you're being, you're exposing your product to all these people. And if it's a good product, then the sales will tell. Um, but what I've done, I've decided to get my product into like places where you wouldn't think about, like corner stores. I have a couple corner stores that bought 25 books, sets of 25 books and things like that. One in Baltimore, one here. And I heard someone say they were talking about, well, what about these young readers? And how are you guys picking them up? And they said one of the biggest things was their accessibility to the books. So I said, okay. I started hitting up places like the library. And then I found out that the library has plenty of money that people don't know about that you can tap into. And you just ask them to purchase your book, and boom. Um, like I said, these other stores that are out there just beside the comic shops, because I've been getting a lot of no from comic shops or only diamond distribution answers. So I decided to just take different routes in distributing the book. it's leg work, but I mean, it's been working.
And then finally, because I think we covered a lot of stuff here, and obviously I want to help you get that book out and get exposure. I think this is a good way to get exposure, and definitely podcasts and getting on them when you can find them. It's a great way how to get exposure. But
Hmm.
I do want to give you an opportunity to promote yourself. So, where can people follow your Facebook page? Where can people find your website? Where can people purchase the book? Where can people order a physical copy? Where can people follow you on Twitter, Instagram, any other social media you got, and anything else pertaining to this book to look out for?
Okay, I'm gonna do this the easy way because I don't remember all those handles and all that stuff, but I do have it right here at the bottom in the book. Pretty much, if you go to Limelight Comics on uh, Facebook, it'll come up. Twitter, it's like at Limelight Verse. Facebook is Limelight Comics, and Instagram is Limelight Comics. The website is limelightcomics.com, which you can purchase the digital or the physical book on there. As well as later on, we will be adding free story. Like the next story we're working on is actually going to be available for free, and we're doing that chapter by chapter, which is a character called Title. Um, so that will be available on our website, and we're really trying to have people go to that website. What we're also doing with the company, we're looking at taking it public, like WeFunder or Start Engine, more like WeFunder, and open it up to the public to have to be able to have shares in the company. We actually are right now. We're writing a script for Netflix, the first 50 episodes. So that's forcing me to write these issues even quicker because now they're like we're in a writing team and we're like, well, what happens in this issue? And I'm like, well, I haven't got there yet. I mean, I have the overall view of what I want for that book, but now we have to speed things up. So yeah, that's the future of the company. That's where you can find the company, and this is what we're doing right now.
Well, I think we're going to end there. I think that's perfect. And I've been saying this with every single episode that ends that you can go buy the book, everybody. It's probably the best way how to support somebody like you and support this company financially right now is picking up a copy of your book, whether that's digital or whether that's ordering a physical copy. And if you can't, well, the next best thing you can do, and it's just as important, is to go follow on Facebook. It's to follow on Twitter because right now I get it. Times are tough. Economics are hard. If you have to take care of your family, and I hope you agree with me on this. Take care of your family or yourself. Make sure you're in a good place economically before you go out and buy comics. And if you're in that situation and you still have access to electricity and the internet, which should be everybody, then you should go follow on Twitter, Facebook, engage, like a post, because those things matter. Those things matter to publishers, to comic shops. Hey, you know what it is? If you like the book, ask your comic shop if they're interested. Push it into your local comic shop. Share it, tweet it at a comic shop. All that stuff helps. And so, unless you don't have electricity and internet, and you got a bigger problem, and I don't know how you're watching this if you don't have electricity or internet, but clearly you have a bigger problem. And so, if that's your problem, I think I understand, I think you understand that they got a
Right.
bigger problem. But if you don't have that problem, there's no excuse but not to like this on Twitter or check it out on Facebook or check out the Instagram and engage, shoot a tweet out about it, like it. It's not that hard. It's free, people. It's free to support, and it really does help with algorithms and everything in between. So no excuse anymore. Been saying it. Say it in every single one, and I'm going to keep saying it because it's so important to get that through. So everybody go check out the book, look at it. If it interests you, check it out, buy it. Buy it digitally if that's your preferable pleasure. Check it out. Obviously you're going to be getting some new books in that hopefully will be right. So we're talking, this is going to go out probably in 2 weeks at the latest.
Yes.
They're going to be shipped out hopefully. COVID-19 delayed stuff, but it's not like this. This is done, guys. So clearly, if you buy a physical copy, it's going to get to you quickly. It's going to get to you quickly. And then to stay up to date on every update and book two and when that's going out and how that's going to be funded, that's also the same thing. And then obviously you might be doing something like a public shared company through WeWork or Start Engine. Well, that's probably going to be updated on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. So if you're
Right.
interested in owning a piece of it or possibly buying a good chunk of it, if that's what you really would like to do, and you think this is a winning horse here, well, that's another thing to pay attention to on one of these social media things and sites or engines or platforms. That's another piece to get your information. So I would just like to say thank you for being on. This is where we're going to end.
Thank you. Thank you. I enjoyed it. And thank you everyone for future purchases. Thank you.